I used to believe that space was silent, that in the void between worlds there was nothing to hear but the hum of my own breathing and the steady thrum of mechanical life support. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. I have discovered that the vacuum can resound with something far more awful than mere emptiness. Even now, as I recount this, I can almost hear it again, that sharp, steady rapping at the metal door. It feels like an echo that reverberates at the edges of my mind. I was 6 months into my solo mission, orbiting Europa in a small station built for one occupant. Me. The mission was straightforward enough. Gather telemetry on Europa's ice crust, study fluctuations in Jupiter's radiation belts, and maintain solitary vigil while our mothership hovered in the distance, a silent beacon of humanity's far reach. At the time, everything felt routine. I was alone, but not lonely, consumed by the steady comfort of my daily checklist. It was a lonely orbit, yes, but not without purpose. The first sign that something was off came a few days before the knocking began. My sensors started fritzing at random intervals. At first, I chalked it up to cosmic rays interfering with the station's instrumentation. I even had a laugh about it, telling myself that the biggest hazard I'd face out here would be fried circuit boards. When the anomalies continued, growing sporadically, but never enough to disable me, I grew irritated instead of worried. I performed a reboot of my major systems. The data spikes remained, but didn't follow any obvious pattern. I made a quick note of it in my log and went about my day, never suspecting the cosmic anomaly might be an omen. Then the knocking started. At first it was so faint that I thought it was just a glitch, some leftover thruster noise, or maybe a piece of debris grazing the hull. I remember standing in the narrow corridor that led to the airlock, listening intently as that metallic click, click, click drifted through my station. No, that's impossible, I told myself. No one could be out there. And yet, I felt my heart hammer against my ribs, the faintest bead of sweat forming on my brow. Curiosity flared. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a small meteorite had lodged itself in the exterior framework. I grabbed my helmet, ready to do an external inspection. A few hours later, I was strapped into the station's cramped environmental suit, tethered, stepping outside to check the hull. Europa's whitish orb glowed below me, and Jupiter's swirling red eye seemed to watch me from the cosmic gloom. Nothing looked amiss. The metal plating was free of dents or damage, the insulation intact, no sign of meteorite impact, no reason for that noise. So I returned inside, stowing my suit, feeling a trickle of unease run through me. That was the last time I felt anything close to normal. The next night, or what I called night, though you can never really tell in space, the knocking grew louder. I woke with a jerk, heart pounding as a rhythmic tap, tap, tap echoed through the station. It seemed to come from just beyond the airlock door. I sat upright in my bunk, barely breathing. Something was knocking to come in. My mind reeled with the impossibility of it. No rescue mission was scheduled, and no extravehicular activities were on the roster. We were too far for unannounced visitors. Protocol demanded communication hours in advance. So who or what was out there? As I crept toward the airlock, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature controls. The door was closed and locked as it should be. My eyes darted to the panel that indicated pressure on both sides. Everything read normal. If something was out there, it didn't register as human. For a moment, I considered opening it, but the training hammered into my psyche forbade such a move without verifying the identity of a visitor or performing a thorough sensor sweep. Shaking, I refused to open the airlock. No matter how persistent that knocking became, I told myself I would not open the door. I forced myself back into bed, But the knocking persisted, an unholy staccato that scrambled my nerves. I covered my ears, desperate for sleep, whispering for it to go away. Eventually, it ceased in the small hours before I had to start my routine. I chalked it up to fatigue or a stress-induced auditory hallucination. Yet the next day, every time I passed by the airlock, I could feel an inexplicable presence. I tried to drown it in tasks, data collection, mechanical checks, routine transmissions to mission control. But that sense of being watched never went away. On the second night, the knocking was angrier, louder. My communications array began to flicker in tandem with each knock. Static poured from the speakers in the command module, crackling and spitting nonsense. I checked the logs. There was no sign of an incoming transmission. Something was interfering with my station systems. Despair settled over me like a cold blanket. Still, I refused to open the door. I told myself it was cosmic debris, a glitch, an echo, anything but a presence. Yet, the knocking never stopped, never let me rest. Sleep deprivation set in. My eyes had grown hollow. My mind flickered. I consumed coffee beyond recommended safe doses, trying to remain awake and alert. But the days blurred together. Each time I drifted off for a moment, a monstrous tapping pulled me back to consciousness. My heart constantly drummed in my chest. I was raw, frayed, and on edge. I tried everything, dulling my hearing with noise-cancelling headphones, playing old Earth songs at max volume, burying my head under pillows. But always, beneath the music, I could hear it, that scratching, rattling knock at the airlock. On the third or fourth sleepless night, time became meaningless to me. I pressed myself against the interior airlock hatch, voice trembling as I spoke. "What do you want?" I asked the emptiness. I half expected no answer, but someone replied. It was a murmur through the metal, a wheezing hiss that almost sounded like my name. My blood turned to ice. I jerked away, stumbling back, certain I'd hallucinated it. The hiss returned, this time forming words I couldn't quite grasp. I felt terror gnawing at me. My mind raced, but I repeated the words. I won't open the door. The presence, the entity, whatever it was, kept at its maddening rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Then a pause. Then scratch, scratch, scratch. Then a hiss that made my nerves spike. The pattern repeated for hours. By the time I was scheduled to send my daily check-in to Earth, I could barely string a sentence together. My voice shook as I reported my status. I excluded mention of the knocking. No good would come from the admission, I reasoned. Mission Control would think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. A week passed in that nightmarish cycle. The knocks grew bolder. Sometimes I thought I heard a long, drawn-out laugh sibilating through the metal. Other times the station lights flickered, bathing the corridors in a trembling half-darkness. Alarms would go off spontaneously, shrieking their warnings of air leaks or failing systems, only to cut out abruptly. I triple-checked everything. The logs showed no anomalies, not even power spikes that would indicate a short. It was as though the station were haunted by some cosmic poltergeist. I tried ignoring it, but each day without real sleep chipped away at my sanity. My reflection in the mirror was ghastly, sunken cheeks, bloodshot eyes. I jumped at every sound, every flicker of light. I felt the walls closing in. The station, which once felt comfortably snug, now seemed suffocating. I felt certain that if this continued, I would do something reckless. And yet, the notion of opening the door still repelled me. I was sure that to open it would be certain death. But one night, it must have been near the end, though who can say how time passes in delirium, I reached my breaking point. I remember staggering out of bed, half crazed, hearing that infernal knock. I was practically trembling from exhaustion, the lines between waking and dreaming fully blurred. My body felt like it was crumbling, my mind a tinderbox. As I stumbled toward the airlock, the entity's voice seeped through the metal, coaxing me in a language that sounded almost human, but not quite. I realized my left hand was unlocking the sequence to the airlock door before I even formed the conscious decision to do it. A final shred of sanity made me pause. My hand hovered over the control pad. Through the plexiglass visor of the small viewing port, I saw nothing but the blackness of space. Yet, I felt sure that something out there was watching me. A voice inside me screamed, "Don't do it." But a stronger compulsion, the relentless hammer of that noise, the sleepless nights, the claustrophobic dread of being alone in the swirling emptiness, overwhelmed my rational mind. My breathing came in ragged gasps, and in a haze, I completed the override. I didn't even bother grabbing a tether or harness. That was the final proof of my delirium. No sane astronaut would open the exterior airlock alone without a lifeline. But I was far beyond sanity's reach. The door slid open with a hiss of depressurization, a wave of air rushing past me, knocking me off my feet. For an instant, a swirling gust whipped through the station, threatening to rip me from the floor. I tried to grab hold of the frame, but it was too late. The vacuum seized me, and I tumbled headlong into the star-speckled void. I felt a brief, frantic pressure in my chest as the air was sucked from my lungs. I don't know why, but in that moment I became oddly calm, like the final acceptance of my own doom. My vision swam with spots of darkness and bright flecks of starlight. Then I heard it. The laugh, low and resonant, seeping into my helmet's comm system from a source I couldn't trace. It was triumphant, mocking, like an ancient god savoring a sacrifice. My station shrank in the distance, drifting away from me while I spiraled out of control. Jupiter's hulking silhouette loomed overhead, swirling in cosmic majesty, dwarfing everything. Below me, Europa grew larger and larger as my momentum carried me in a deadly arc toward its surface. I tried to right myself, to orient my body in some last futile protest against the inevitability of my fate. Panic clawed its way back in. Could I get to my emergency thruster pack? No, I hadn't even worn it. My fingertips brushed the empty place where it should have been. Another grotesque laugh echoed in my ears. In a matter of seconds or minutes, in terror, time can move in strange ways. I felt Europa's gravity tugging me in. I was falling, plummeting faster and faster, powerless. My lungs ached, my muscles convulsed from decompression. The cold was unimaginable, biting through my suit, turning my extremities numb. Still, I heard the laughter inside my helmet, growing louder, as if that impossible presence were descending with me. I lost consciousness briefly, or perhaps I was still awake but delirious. The memory is scattered, my limbs flailed, and I vaguely recall the blue-white surface of Europa rushing to meet me. My final coherent thought was of Earth, ironically, of the small farm where I grew up, the feeling of sun on my skin, and the wind that smelled of grass and life. Then, as if snapping a thread, the hideous laugh tore through my last shred of lucidity, and I slammed into the ice of Europa at terminal velocity. I didn't die instantly, or so it seemed. The pain was unholy, like every bone had shattered at once. But it was fleeting, overshadowed by the ringing in my ears, the blackness that swallowed me. I think I heard that laugh one final time, echoing through my broken visor as my consciousness winked out. It had claimed its prize. I was gone. And so here ends my story, recounted in the final flickering moments of my mind, or in some limbo before oblivion. If you are reading this log, or hearing the fractured transmissions that escape the station, Know this: the void is not empty. Something dwells out here, and it wants in. It will not stop knocking, not until you open the door. And when you do, you will hear its laughter, echoing in the vacuum of space as you plummet into the cold, unfeeling darkness.